Hi, everyone. I am so delighted to be with you in spirit at this awards dinner. And I am so grateful to the learning community for person centered practices for this Rising Tide Leadership Award. I know you are giving these awards to those who've pioneered the positive vision and innovative practices that do significantly increase and improve the lives of those who depend on services and those who support them and community members. And so I am so proud to be in the company of past leaders, and I love thinking ahead to how each one of you is a leader in your own right and will be a future leader. And I'm also particularly delighted to be in the same space as my friends BJ Stasio and Angela Amato, who are sharing this space to recognize historic leaders and activists in the disability inclusion movement. As we well know, it's a long-term devotion to deep change and to the well-being of each other. And I so appreciate my friendship with BJ of more than 30 years and all the courageous conversations we have had. And Angela, I think we've been in this together for 45 or more years. And I have such deep respect for the ways that you have stayed true to the possibility of building better relationships on behalf of people. So here we are. The rising tide represents an ocean of goodwill, the result of partnerships and possibilities that people just stick with over time. And I love this quote by BJ. We move forward together, united by the belief that every person deserves dignity, respect, opportunity, and freedom to live the life they choose. And when we think of what person-centered work looks like and feels like, it has the quality of supporting every person to find that star, to find that possibility for a higher purpose in life, and to shoot for that star, not isolated, not alone, but in the company of other people. And so when that is happening, we call those lives lights of belonging, because belonging has been our intention all of these years. And there are so many people, seen, particularly unseen, who are living their best life because they've been in the work over time. They've been, like BJ, making a way out of no way. We're grateful for this star of valued experiences developed by John O'Brien and Connie Lyle O'Brien almost 50 years ago. And it's just interesting to note that at the top of this star is belonging. And in some ways, we are really just beginning to get to a point where we can understand and see what it looks like and feels like when people truly belong. What I have appreciated about the guidance of this star is that the contents came from listening to parents and to people with disabilities many years ago who were willing and able to give voice to what they really longed for. And John and Connie wove interviews with thousands of people into this star that reminds us what it looks like and feels like to make a difference. And what I wanted to touch on briefly in my few minutes with you is, what does it look like when we're doing the work well? What are we paying attention to? And we stick with an understanding that our attention is powerful, and person-centered thinking and person-centered work is one way to refine the quality of our attention. And also, we are here together, and you will go out of this gathering tomorrow to look at the growing edge. And these are the places where new life is possible because people have refused to accept what diminishes human dignity. Let me just say that again. If BJ was here, I can hear him saying it's because people refuse to accept what diminishes human dignity. The edge is not held by those in power alone. It is held by communities and by individuals and by those of us who keep asking, what more is possible against all odds? And so Howard Thurman, who was one of the great thinkers and prophets really in the civil rights movement in America, reminds us that especially when things are difficult and it feels like we're really not getting anywhere in terms of the ideals we know are possible, that we want to revisit the growing edge, the places where new life is possible because people have refused to accept what diminishes human dignity. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the imaginative journey. And this was one way that I had, and of course, many of you know that I am involved in story quilting. And as much as anything, the point of making these artworks together, like the star that John and Connie brought to our awareness, is to create something that reflects what a collective knows. And so the imaginative journey grew out of lots of conversations among people about what do we see when people really are making a difference in people's lives over time, right? When the real experience of belonging is taking shape for people and people's lives are really changing. And so I wanted to share just a couple of observations from these 4 quadrants of the imaginative journey that surround the heart of the work. And here we have the heart, and the heart reminds us that at our best, person-centered planning and person-centered work is a way of discovering life purpose on behalf of each one of us, but every person that we are privileged to walk with, to learn from, and to grow together with. And that it is through listening and through listening over time that real change emerges. And that what all of our stories, our best stories, have in common is the building of relationships, quality relationships that lead to belonging. So what are the 4 core elements that help us hold on to the heart? So let's just say what the heart is in a slightly different way. At the heart of the imaginative journey is we do imagine that every single person, and I want to emphasize this, that no one is left out, regardless of the complexity of their situations and the degrees to which they're challenged. They challenge us to imagine these possibilities, but we want to imagine that each of us has a gift, and each person we support has a higher purpose, and everyone, wherever they live, in the heart of New York City or in the most rural places of America, that there are places that need the gift. And there are possibilities for people to belong that revitalize other people and other people's purpose and the places that they're in. And so, what's important about the heart of the matter here is if we don't have faith in these possibilities, we won't necessarily see them. And so we have to remind ourselves time and time again to remember that that's what we're up to here, is seeing and imagining the gifts and a higher purpose, places that need the gift, and possibilities to belong. And so we have these 4 quadrants that remind us of what the jobs, what our attention, where to put our attention, where to keep our attention. And the first one we know really well through person-centered planning. That's the place where we amplify together with people to help discover life's purpose. And there are now thousands and thousands of ways that people engage in person-centered work, and that's a wonderful thing. And we want to be reminded that the power of person-centered planning is to amplify capacities and to discover life's work and to build one day and 1 month and 1 year at a time over a lifetime, increasing opportunities for people to flourish and to thrive and to belong. This is Brett, and Brett is supported by Inclusion Alberta. It's one of the most important places in the world to understand what does it look like when people who live in a certain area, Alberta, Canada, have access to pathways toward inclusion for an entire lifetime, from the time they're born until the time they leave this earth. And Inclusion Alberta practices person-centered planning and thinking and reflecting over and over and over again through a lifetime. And whatever planning process people are using, they also turn their vision and ideas into some artwork that speaks to the person and their circle of support, that helps remind them what is the purpose, the focus, and the vision here. Another favorite story of mine comes from Gallup, New Mexico. This is Cecilia's portrait, power portrait. We call these power portraits when people take a plan and represent what matters to them in a piece of art. And Celia has had the good fortune to live in the Navajo Nation. And as a woman in an indigenous culture, she's had the wonderful benefit of belonging in every conceivable way, in the ways that individuals in her culture live together. And so she's involved in powwows and church and family life and employment. And she's an amazing craftswoman, and on and on and on. You don't even have to be able to read the picture to appreciate the richness of life when we're paying attention to belonging. Okay, well, what do we know about what else it takes, though? Because we all live with a certain disappointment that more and more people have good plans, but they're not being actualized. People don't have the opportunity to grow into the richness of life. And so that brings us to this second quadrant here, which invites us, we are invited here to innovate. And by innovation, in my experience, and when we look at the stories where people's lives have changed most dramatically, it's when we've been able to create pockets of potential. And that's a way to describe creating prototypes that support people to grow into, with good support, the possibilities that we've generated. And Of course, I'm sure everyone here has an experience of or is a part of individualized supports. And we know now more than ever in 2026 that it is the presence of individualized supports, the availability of individualized supports, that often has the greatest impact on the capacity to make a difference. I'm not going to go through all of these, and there's many more beyond this list, but I do want to mention two of them just because we've seen the power over the years of customized employment. So if you're in a place where people are not working on and working towards customized employment, that would be a really great pocket of potential to bring into the lives of the people that you're involved with. There's an agency in New York City, Job Path, that started out providing customized employment for 5 people. And they went from 5 to 300, and they went from 300 to 1,000. They've supported more than 1,000 people throughout New York City to have really wonderful jobs where they not only have more economic opportunity, but they really belong to places of employment and have rich relationships there. So that reminds us also that belonging is at the heart of the organizational innovations that we invest in. Let me put it another way. If belonging is not at the heart of our innovations, we're not going to get nearly as far along as we might. And that brings me to our third quadrant here. And this, I like to think this is one of the most important edges of possibility that we are all only now really beginning to understand what it looks like and feels like when we associate with people far beyond human services. And we support individuals, and we ourselves become ecosystem citizens. Now, what in the world do I mean by that? I'm talking about community building, right? I'm talking about mutual aid. I'm talking about belonging to local communities. And I'm talking about it in a way that, well, let me just tell a story. Okay, this isn't a story that I know of for the last 14 years. And it's a story of Harlem grown Tony Hillary, who was a limousine driver and really burned out about that, who started this little garden in Harlem to grow food for the neighborhood. And the young man on the right is Christopher, coming out of special ed in New York City schools, who began volunteering at Harlem Grown. As a part of Christopher's volunteering, he and several other people created the first little free library in the Harlem Grown garden. And over the past 14 years, Harlem Grown has proliferated into countless community gardens, feeding thousands of people throughout Harlem, bringing people together across every conceivable difference and need to meet their food justice needs and issues. And at the same time, these little free libraries have proliferated all over. And this is just such a wonderful example of what our friend Danietta Najoli calls nurturing mutually beneficial relationships. So what might it look like if every single person we are supporting, we are finding ways to nurture mutually beneficial relationships by finding the places in local community life where people can belong and make a difference? And By the way, those little free libraries now are all over New York City. Can't even keep up with them. Millions of books have gone out because of a tiny innovation in a tiny garden that has turned into something really significant. And I just last month, I wanted to finish this story. I love the surprised look on Tony's face. King Charles, in his visit to the United States, went to Harlem Grown to visit fellow ecosystem activists. And here we have Chris, our friend Chris, who had become an employee at Harlem Grown over the years. He's worked for Harlem Grown for 9 years. And there's just something quite beautiful about being visible. Well, so what is the point I want to make is that most of what's happening in local communities like this is invisible. The places don't show up on websites and maps. It's people coming together because they're passionate about something that citizens need in their local community. And how much someone's life changes when their gifts and capacities and skills and limitations are lined up with a place that really needs the gift. And so finally, I will say, yes, and I think it's really cool that King Charles, of all the things he could have done when he was in New York City, he went to visit other ecosystem citizens and using his authority and standing to shed some light on good work. So finally, I'll finish up with this. Our last challenge, our last quadrant of using our attention in the service of deep change. The fourth one is activate, grow collective action. So we're at a point now in our development where it's really important to move beyond our own silos, our own professional roles and perceived divisions, to be united together in the service of change. And this is a photograph of such a group in Georgia, the Uniting for Change in Georgia. And I bet you some of you in this room might even see yourself in the Uniting for Change movement. And also, there's a beautiful person-centered thinking collective in Georgia as well. People in these photographs overlap. What matters is people come together across their roles. So you've got individuals with disabilities and direct support staff, agency directors, citizens, family members, parents, friends. You've got people coming together year after year to take on real issues that matter to everybody. So people are not only looking at their own lives and working on their own sense of possibilities, but they're taking on voting rights and they're taking on transportation systems in their rural communities that don't have transportation options. They're taking on DSP salary increases and better support for families and for people in crisis, and helping young people in transition from high school imagine how they can be a part of a world that works for everyone. So our fourth quadrant reminds us that we are better together, and that is where deep change is emerging and where it gets most interesting. And I'll leave you with this. As you know, it is small acts. So sometimes it doesn't feel like we're doing so much, right? But it's the small acts multiplied by millions of people that can quietly become a power that no government can suppress a power that can transform the world. Howard Zinn is a historian and a person who's recorded a lot of what we know about change, and he'll be the first to say it is always the small acts multiplied by millions of people that quietly become a power. And this is us, right? BJ Stasio reminds us this is us. We are the millions of people. We can quietly become a power that will not be suppressed. And we are a power that can transform the world. So just take that with you into your evening celebration and to the next stage and wave of your own ocean of goodwill. And once again, thank you so much for this lovely honor and for the opportunity to be with you this evening.